Welcome to 2D6 Saturday, the only way to start your weekend for reals, because as you know, Saturday doesn't count as part of the weekend until you've watched this show. You're unable to relax, let your hair down, until my beautiful photoshopped imagery and wonderful soothing voice appears on the screen and in your ears. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to 2D6 Saturday on the eve of a tournament. That's because I have a Dead Zone tournament tomorrow, which I've been preparing for. Those of you who've been following all my other videos will know that I've been working on some terrain for that, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Shall we see who's in the chat before we start ploughing into this one, shall we? Let's see. We have Bazooka J Rambo, Mickey Genver, Dice Miniature Paint Guy is in there. Ross Diggle is in there. And anyone else said anything in the last few minutes? I think someone else commented earlier, but not currently. And yes, this is about 13 minutes later than advertised because, as you may recall, I was having some computer problems, but they seem to be resolved now. The computer I was using last time is now over there, and the new computer, which is less than 2 years old, is now back in its rightful place under the desk after the replacement part arrived. And I put that in last night and seems to be running smoothly so far. No random shutdowns anymore. But of course, every time you do anything to a computer, all the kind of Logitech devices suddenly stop working. So you have to restart about 10,000 times, change all the settings, download different kinds of software to like get the correct zoom on the camera, because if it's zoomed too far out, you can see bits of wall that aren't orange, and we can't have that, can we? So that's always fun, remembering to do that just before going live on the air. And I've also been listening out for the postman today, because I'm expecting multiple parcels. One did actually arrive, which contained some of these little suckers. Let's see if you can have a close look. There we go. Look at that instant focus. That's hardcore there. So these are for relics. I'm not sure of the exact pronunciation of these. Equites, maybe, something like that. But they're one of the newer models in the relics range, which I wanted to get some just in case they never make any more. And they've got limited numbers of things on the website. I actually ordered some Britannian Rangers as well. It's claimed there was 4 in stock. And then they sent me an email saying, well, actually, too bad because we don't have any of those, so we'll refund you for them and just send the Newham guys. So I've got them, and if you want anything relics related, you should probably head over to any retailer that still has any left over and snap them up just in case they don't come back. You never know, TT Combat might get fed up of them by the time they actually get round to remaking everything in resin. Some of them they might just make entirely new sculpts. But you may notice actually with these guys, if you have another look here, they're not actually perfectly centered on the base, which is something that would normally drive me nuts. But I thought, I've got 6 of them, so I'll put 3 slightly to the right and 3 slightly to the left. So it evens out in the end, because I really don't want to cut off the metal tab that secures them in place and then find another way to attach them, maybe pinning just to get them in the center. I thought that would be way too much effort. So they're going to be really easy to paint. And I'm going to run out of space on this desk because the other parcels I'm waiting for, I'm waiting for my new airbrush to arrive, which is just a cheap Chinese one, most likely, a little £10 one from eBay. Only use it for base coats, really, rather than the precision airbrushing some people do. And then the large, mysterious benefactor-backed pre-order of the new Age of Sigmar stuff. Still waiting for that. So if that doesn't come at some point tonight, it will arrive on Monday, which will be in plenty of time for the double live unboxing for the Andy and Rem show on Monday, where we're both going to unbox Soul Wars at the same time on camera. So that's going to be a first for the world, because you can't just do one unboxing. People have been unboxing it for weeks, those who've got their advanced review copies. So the only way we can really compete was with a double unboxing. So you can look forward to that on Monday. You can also look forward on Monday to my breakdown, deep probing analysis of all my games from the Dead Zone tournament tomorrow in Stockport. I've got my army all packed up and ready to go. It's the biggest box I've had to use yet for my Plague, because Well, you'll see why when we get to my force, and you'll see that some of them don't like small boxes and being tightly packed at all. Some of them would not enjoy that journey. So we will get to that very, very shortly. And anything else to report? Oh yes, it's very, very hot and I may melt throughout the show. Look, I'm having to wear a t-shirt. I'm having to wear clothes in this heat. Let's see what the temperature is right now here. Using my handy dandy phone right now. It is, it's only 23 degrees. So it's getting cooler. It was about 28 yesterday, at least, I think. So it doesn't really help the attic. I've got a blind on the window now, so it doesn't start melting until later on in the afternoon. It used to just shine in through the window, the sun all day, non-stop, and it would melt everyone in here from about 10 a.m. But with the blind, now you get a few more hours of kind of cool temperatures before it slowly seeps in. So I've had the window open and the fan on. Let's see if you can hear the fan, actually. I'll start the fan going for a second. Tell me if that is audible on the microphone. And no, Mickey, I'm not doing a naked show at the moment. I had to shut the window as well, because it's probably wise to shut the window anyway around here, because you do get a few people whose language is a little bit colourful, shall we say, walking down the street outside. I'm not sure it would all be suitable for broadcast. And someone started doing some really loud kind of machinery work outside. Let's turn the fan off again. No, that's a cool, refreshing blast of air there. So that will tide me over for a few more minutes. And let's see. Anything else interesting in the chat here? Bazooka Rambo has been shaking his cans of primer. That reminds me, actually, tomorrow at the tournament, since it's at Element Games, I'm going to have to buy a can of Army Painter spray, because you can't really get that stuff without paying an obscene amount in postage nowadays, since they changed the rules on what you could send through the post. In the regular post, it has to be sent by special courier or something now. So it wouldn't be eligible for the Element Games free postage, which is what I use to make my large pre-order, Age of Sigmar related, and some paints in there as well, and a few other things tacked on there, milliput as well, I believe, on the order. Okay, so I think it's time to start talking about the tournament coming up tomorrow. So if anyone else has any things that they would like to bring up, any topics you want to see touched upon, then feel free to drop them in there. Oh, hello to Graham Rigg, Captain Beholder himself. So let's bring up the screen share here, and you can have a look at my forces that I'm taking tomorrow. So it's the Plague, it's 200-point tournament, and I'm going to go into more detail on all of this afterwards, of course. I don't want to tip everyone off as to my strategy beforehand, but a few other people have posted pictures of their forces as well, so I'm going to look over those. And one person, in fact, sent me their entire list, so I'm going to be able to look at that. So I'll bring that up on my phone when we get to that. And here is my list A. So the new murder birds that I painted are in there, and this particular one here, this is the main reason that I'm using a larger box than usual, because it's so big. And the most fragile part is this bird here, sticking off the side. So if I put it in any kind of box where it's going to potentially hit against something, I'm concerned that would break off despite the multiple pins running through it. And I wouldn't be too sure about these guys surviving a journey in certain boxes either. So they are metal, obviously. Then we've got Teraton in there. This isn't Dr. Simmons, despite the model. This is just a general. A couple of zombies, 4 dogs. I would possibly like to take more dogs, but I've only got 4, so I may have to snap up some more of those in the near future, because I'm not really feeling the zombies at the moment. They're all right for not giving away points, but they seem to die instantly every time they're shot at by anything. Then we've got Plague Swarm, stage 2 there. And I'm taking 2 stage 2, but not in this list. I'm taking this one here, which is the friendlier one, with his arm out, as if to put it round you in an affectionate and consoling manner. And then 2 HMG specialists. So this is my list for boards that aren't exactly mortar friendly, shall we say, because you'll see in my other list 2 mortars. So 2 mortars, 2 teratons, a bird, Swarm, the really upset and depressed looking stage 2, a zombie, 4 dogs, and the general again. So, oh, hello to Dead Gamer there as well, who isn't often able to catch these shows live. So, 2 mortars in this one. And if this was the kind of tournament where you just take one list, would I ever just put 2 mortars in there at 200 points? I don't know, it's a big risk because you could end up playing on tables where it's not really viable. If you have lots of tall towers with ceilings on, and people can just sit like the second highest level and shoot you and not be shot with mortars, then it's not the best. You'll still have uses for them, so you'd always want to have at least one given the opportunity, because there are things you can do with them. For example, objective clearing, because all the objectives are always on the highest point, so they'll always have some use. But if you want to get the biggest boom possible out of them, then certain terrain layouts will hinder them. So you don't necessarily want to be having 2 or 3 of them thrust upon you in every game. The double Teraton action here, which I think combines well with the mortars, because you'll find that since they introduced the rule that size 3 and 4 creatures can't go on half cubes, then a lot of people seek refuge hiding on kind of half a cube thick bridges, knowing that Teratons can't get them. But when you've got mortars around to blast them down, and then Teratons to swoop in there, which is a tactic I've used recently, then I find that quite handy. And the Plague Swarm and the Bird, I think, will be good for those kind of models that are hiding from Teratons as well. They're only size 2, and of course the stage 2 as well, so there's not many places you can hide from them. And another purpose of the mortars, of course, is just to get things pinned, as it just blows up the whole cube and sends people out flying everywhere, knocks them down. So then when someone comes in to attack, of course, they're better in close combat. Here, obviously, with no mortars, the HMGs have a similar role, but they're a little bit more vulnerable because they don't have the size advantage on their size, so they don't last as long, and they have to actually see what they're shooting at in order to even try a shot. The mortar, if you're shooting into a tightly packed enemy force, then even if you miss more often than you hit, it may still scatter onto the enemy regardless. So HMG's in there to fill that role. And also, I wasn't sure about the idea of taking mortars in a list where I've got 3 murder birds, because if you're lucky, you can actually end up getting attacks in the first turn with them because they're so fast and they can scout. So do I really want to be firing mortars all the way across to the other side of the table while I've got some of my models there? Seems a bit risky to me. So we shall see. But those are my 2 lists. No major strategy giveaways that aren't obvious just by looking at the models. And I'll let you know how it all goes. I did go undefeated at the last tournament, so we'll see if this is even better. Skeleton Flower has just popped up in the chat. Hello there. We're still waiting for the next episode of Skelevision, by the way. Right, here is another one of the lists. This is clearly an Enforcer list here. And not all the players at the tournament have posted pictures of their stuff. I actually have a complete list for this one here, which I'm just looking at right now on my phone. So I believe, because Enforcers, a lot of them look the same to me, but I can pretty much tell that these are Assault Enforcers here. So let's see. Yes, I think we've got the correct list here. So Assault Enforcers with pistols, which is always useful. The 2 dudes with the shield, they are Peacekeepers. So I believe they give extra defensive abilities to anyone in the same cube as them, which is nice. So there's the missile launcher as well, which is, let's see, Enforcer Specialist with the missile launcher. So he's actually quite a lot of points, that guy. But any big stuff, he's just going to shoot that at that, most likely, if anyone's brought any Striders, for example. I don't really have anything that's too much of a juicy target for that. If you look here, I'm not packing a vast amount of armor. The highest I've got on anything is armor 1, I think. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with things like missile launchers. Possibly a bit of a waste of points against me, although it does have the range. Then we've got some regular Enforcers in there as well. The leader here is an Enforcer Sergeant. So it's nothing too fancy, a decent model count there, nothing too crazy and elite. Then the second list, okay, this is where it gets juicy. So you've got Assault Enforcers, regular Enforcers again. This time you've got Strider. Let's see what it's armed with here. Got the list right here. With an Equalizer. Is that the type of Strider it is? I don't know. But I believe that's a gun, regardless of the fact that it's got a chainsaw on the end. Also, the chainsaw will help it hide in cover as well, so it's not going to be clear shot by anything, which is an interesting point. If we go back to my lists for a second, you'll see that this stage 2 is tightly packed inside his base. So if you get a chance to shoot at him, you may very well get extra dice for shooting because he's tightly packed like that. But if you shoot at this one, he's always going to have a finger round a corner. So, you're not going to get a clear shot on him. And I've just been told that this is actually the wrong picture for the second list. Oh dear, oh dear. Well, I think we get the idea. Let's see. There are snipers. One sniper there's supposed to be, which would be one of those two. So, yes, must have been amended since this picture came in. But there is actually a sniper in there. There are some burst lasers, though, in the real version of this list, which I'm looking at here. So a couple of those. Interesting. If I come up against things such as Striders, I don't have a huge amount of AP. So chewing through armor might not be that easy. I think the only thing I've got probably is my Plague Swarms. I don't think anything else really has any AP. But obviously, armies aren't going to have a vast amount of these things in them. You're probably just going to have one or two at most, so if you kill everything else. Right, we've got a Plague list here, which is... It has some similarities to one of my lists. It looks like we've got the general there. We've got Murder Birds. How many have we got? We've just got one. We've got 2 Plague Swarms, which is always nasty. I was considering taking 2 Plague Swarms, but I've tried them out a lot, the Plague Swarms, so I really want to try out the Murder Birds this time. So I've gone all out with them to give them a good field test. And then a couple of zombies, it looks like, or is that 3 zombies, perhaps? A Burster, which I don't own any models yet. I did see it in the pile of prizes for this tournament, actually, so if I get to the prize pot anywhere near the beginning, I'd probably go for the pack of Bursters if I get the opportunity. Some stage 2s, HMG, a dog, Teraton. Nothing too crazy out of the ordinary there. The double Plague Swarm is, of course, scary for some people. Anyone who's taking lots of armor wouldn't like that. Mickey Genvat, I thought this show was about terrain. I think you'll find that was only half of the title. I'm going to be discussing my terrain building exploits. Okay, the next one. This is the other list from the same person. So, we've got Teraton again. The general's been swapped out for the stage 1, who I haven't taken at all, because I just find him to be too many points. And he doesn't die that much, but he rarely gets to fight, because people can just stay away from him so easily. Okay, then we've got 2 Plague Swarms again. 2 birds in this one. The 2 stage 2s are still in there. The 3 zombies are in there. It looks like we've got 2 dogs instead of 1. No bursters in this one. The Teraton remains, though. So there are definitely some similarities to my lists, but not that close. No mortars in sight anywhere. It doesn't look like there's an HMG in this one. So this is the more speed and in-your-face kind of list, even though it's got him in it, the slowest thing of all. Now, GCPS, this isn't broken down into strike teams at all. This is just both his lists in the same place. I don't know which models are common to both lists. So maybe none of them, who knows? A couple of mortars in there and a couple of striders. So the fact that he's got 2 mortars and 2 striders in his collection here would suggest to me that one list is going to have 2 mortars and one list is going to have 2 striders. Otherwise, surely you would only need to get one of each in there if they're both common to each list. So probably 2 of them in one, 2 of them in another. And the rest of these guys, I don't really know enough about GCPS. They're just your pretty standard dudes, most of them. None of them look particularly fancy. Maybe this guy, maybe he's got a bit of a better weapon, perhaps. Maybe not. So really, yeah, it's all about these expensive ones here and then the cheap cannon fodder, most likely. I assume that's the leader there. Dave Doge says you're going to miss the Portugal game. No, I'm not. This show's going to be done by then. I'm cramming in these shows nicely between World Cup matches, and if we get too close to the hour, then I will just temporarily run downstairs and pause the TV. But I'm not going to miss more games in this World Cup. It already cheeses me off enough that they put 2 games at the same time at the end of the group, which of course is important so you don't find out what the other teams in the group do and then just play for a draw or whatever you need once you know the other results. I can understand why they play them at the same time. Okay. GCPS, not much to say about them. I've only faced them once, I think. Now we've got more Plague. First thing that greets me is this murder bird down here, which I don't think is part of it. It looks like he's trying to sneak into the shot there, photobombing it, but I don't think he's in there. So, 4 Teratons. Yeah, there's no way you'd fit all of this into 200 points, so this is obviously both of the strike teams combined. But the fact that he's taking 4 Teratons would suggest to me that all 4 of them are from the same list. Then an Aberration, Stage 1, Strider, so lots of big stuff. So anyone who's taking missile launchers, this is the guy you want to come up against. Unless he's got one of his lists that contains none of the big stuff at all and is just spammed with all this nonsense. So we've got 5 dogs there, some birds on the tiny base. So that looks like he's actually used half as many murder birds as you're supposed to my eye. But I can't say for 100% because I haven't assembled the tiny, really fiddly ones. Then it looks like there's a zombie, but lots of regular stage 3s, which you don't really see much of in Plague lists. So, could be a list with a lot of numbers in it and another one with a lot of elite stuff in it. Interesting. Obviously, you see which faction you're up against first and then decide. So if you're up against something that packs a lot of armor-killing punch, like, for example, it would be Forge Fathers, I think. Basically everything they have has AP on it, so you'd want to take loads of really terrible troops. They're just wasting that AP. And then if you come up against something that has no AP at all, like my lists, you would want the elite stuff. So lots of Plague at this tournament. I think there are 6 Plague players there out of about 12 or 13. There was 14 at one point, but one person dropped out. Okay. Let's have a look. This is the prize pool here. This is the prize pool. Last time it had a photograph taken of it anyway. So that's what I'm eyeing up there. Plague Bursters. So if I get to dive in there. I don't know what the prize for last place is usually the biggest one, so maybe that'll be the complete Star Saga set down there. And then some more Star Saga bits, some dog tags, of course, and this guy, who looks very large, but I'm definitely eyeing them up. Okay, so we can go on to terrain building a bit now, because I think I've finished just about going through all these. So I've got a bit of a taster for what all the lists are, and it's going to be an interesting day. I haven't seen any list that makes me think that is going to be a walkover. Maybe nobody with a less than stellar list has actually posted it up. Maybe it's all just psychological warfare, those of us that are putting up our pictures early. Although I have let slip that I'm not bringing 5 or 6 murder birds, which is something I did threaten to do. But that would mean painting more of them, so we can't have that, can we? So it's going to be fun, and you can look forward to me reporting back on that on Monday. So, terrain. Now, you should have been following my videos on this, including the last video I did, which was just a very short 1-minute long showcase of some beautiful photography that I did on my new table with the Basement of Doom. This shot here with a rebel trooper facing down the hideous sight of the stage 1. I see a lot of mediocre pictures online, and I also see a lot of ridiculously good ones. The ridiculously good ones you tend to find are, I'm talking about the in-action shots a lot of people take really good pictures just against a white backdrop, just showing off their painting. I'm talking about kind of cinematic shots. GW do a lot of really good stuff on their preview videos for factions and so on. You'll see a lot of really interesting angles, but some companies, I don't think, exploit photography enough to make their miniatures look better and put them in a scene that is going to inspire people and fill them with excitement. So I tried to use a little bit of imagination. I used my phone to create some light, and the light in the room was off, so the only light available is coming from my phone shining in from a particular direction. And I think this creates... You can tell that this person here can see that because the light's shining in from this way. It's left to your imagination what hideous monstrosity is left there, bearing down on this poor victim. And I like the way the light just catches on the hand. You can see the red, you can see the blood. That's really the only detail of this creature you can make out, is the fact that it's got blood on its hand. And I really like that look. So, tasty. Some general pictures as well. There are some more cinematic pictures like that on the previous video I did, if you're interested in seeing more of those. I think that was the best one, though. So, the table that I've built, especially for this tournament, although I've wanted this in general, but I wanted to get it ready for this tournament. This is the first time I want to use it. So, let's have a look in the old comments there. Dead Gamer, that is my favourite pick from Andy's terrain picks. It looks awesome. Dave Doge says that makes sense. The mobile phone light is smaller than the target object, thus creating hard shadows. Yes, it's a very tiny light, which makes it look like it's kind of realistic, the kind of lighting you would expect to find in a dark, dank tunnel when facing down with the enemy. Maybe you've just dropped a flare into the corner of the tunnel there, and that's the only place that the light is coming from. Dave Doge says that Andy is the next Stanley Kubrick. The suggestions that maybe I'm going to fake the moon landings. Well, there may be some moon landings coming up over the next few years. You never know, with the crazy way the world's going. Money being blown on pointless things. So anyone who wants to hire me to fake a moon landing with my limited experience of such things, I'm always available. So, the board. It's got blue foam in the middle, and this substance that was put over it was recommended to me by someone in the chat, actually, Mr. Ross. Recommended a mixture of filler, sand, and PVA glue. I didn't use too much PVA glue in it, but I used a lot of filler and sand, and I just added really cheap black paint. If you saw the black paint that I used to make the wash for the frame outside and that I use on all my Dead Zone terrain, way cheaper than that. The one I used for the wash was a really cheap acrylic paint. The paint that I added to this mixture was just like really cheap, £1 for a huge bottle. Like, what would you do with it? Like for children painting on huge bits of paper, kind of. That really terrible paint, pretty much. You couldn't use it for anything on a miniature because it'd just be awful. But adding it slowly until it was the right level of grey that I was looking for, I wanted it to look quite dusty and destroyed, and I think the way it came out is very nice. So I mixed all that up in a big box, dumped it in the middle, and then just, as it came out kind of like cement, and then just spread it all over the whole thing, and then made sure that there weren't any crevices, went over it all, spread it all out as evenly as possible, smoothed it down mostly. There's nothing wrong with little rough pieces though, because it's supposed to look kind of beaten up, and then pressed these lines into it before it was dry, of course, so you can see where the cubes are. And then after that, there was some dry brushing on it with white. I think it was a very, very light grey, actually. So some dry brushing on it. And then you can see down here where I've added a different shade of grey. I've tried to make it look like maybe there's moisture running through the earth, which has come down and darkened bits of it internally and then has kind of pooled down there. And it breaks up the colour a bit, makes it look a bit more interesting, I think. And there you can see there's a few little... I suppose they're kind of Easter egg-like because you have to hunt for them a bit. There are a few little bits of plant life around underneath in the basement of Doom as well. And you can see the setup with the terrain on it as well. I've actually got the terrain set up that I'm going to use at the tournament all planned out. I've taken a picture of it on my phone and then packed up all the terrain in a box. So I think I've found a good even setup for it. So that'll be set up tomorrow morning. Then this bit here, I thought I've got to add a little bit of colour to it to make it more interesting. What about like a section of strange kind of, maybe not necessarily precious stones, but maybe strange and alien somehow. So I got lots of little pebbles. I believe they're mainly used in fish tanks or maybe a vase for fake flowers or those types of things, and stuck them on there and then just put clear green paint over them. Tamiya clear green, to be precise. And I think that looks quite good. I wouldn't put it all the way around because I think it would be a bit over the top. But there's one spot that has that in it, so I think that's a nice little touch. You can see more of the darker grey as well there around the place here. And then a nice corner shot where you can see more. I've done more dry brushing in white underneath the holes into the basement because obviously there would be more light down there, whereas it's supposed to be darker down here. And you're not going to see it very much all the way, like right underneath the ceiling here. You're not going to see much of that, but it is all painted under there, of course. I know a lot of people follow the if you're never going to see it, then don't paint it, but I generally don't follow that. Even if I've painted someone with a cape, then usually I'll paint them without the cape first and then stick that on afterwards, covering up most of my own paintwork. Where the doors were here, there was a little bit of a gap when I finished applying all this stuff. So I had to scrape a bit off the top, I think, and then fill in all the gaps right up to the door, because I don't want people being able to trace line of sight where there isn't supposed to be line of sight traced. So I've filled in all the gaps as much as I can, all the way around the top, so you can't see down there. And of course, you can't trace line of sight through the holes that are supposed to be for the connectors. That's a little bit not the way it's supposed to be done. So tried to limit lines of sight to where I intended it to be. So there's holes there. This is the side of the table where there is no hole at all. This is just a long straight bit of tunnel. So if you want to go down there and you can't teleport, you better be prepared for a long fight with whatever else is down there, because there's no way out other than just going back. And if anyone has any questions about that terrain, feel free to get those in now. And let's stop the old screen share for a minute then, shall we? So I've not melted yet, which is nice. I can feel the slow melting effects of this searing heat. Let's have a look at the chat here, shall we? People talking about paintbrushes. Dave Doge. Can't find Series 7 Winsor & Newton brushes in my capital city. A guy in the shop said there was a supply problem due to the US disallowing rat hair. Well, yeah, the US, they do have some strange rules on what they won't allow. For example, Kinder eggs. I mean, I can see how Kinder eggs and rat hair could be potentially fatal to anyone, so I can fully understand that. Speaking of paintbrushes, actually, I did purchase some recently. Let's see if I can just find them all here. So there is a shop local to me that sells really cheap art supplies. So let's take the lid off one of these brushes so you can see them a bit. So these are incredibly cheap, and look at that. I like to have a lot of brushes like this because I find that the good brushes, when you're using them for anything unnecessarily, they tend to wear out and die. So I tend to only use the good brushes when I actually have to. For example, if I'm doing base coats, I'll just use a really cheap, awful brush. And even if it's kind of detail, but it's the first detail, if it's something where the whole model is just lots of detail, the first color that goes on, I can do that in a bit of a haphazard manner, you might say. Then I can do that with a really cheap, terrible brush. And I just like to have lots of awful brushes. So I've got a ton of them, and they do wear out. If you look at the ones like this, that's a result of product like, let's see, there we go, Typhus Corrosion, one of the Citadel technical paints, because it's got kind of grit in it to make a texture. Then brushes end up, I hope I didn't hit the microphone then, brushes end up being partially demolished by it. So it's good to have really cheap ones for applying things like that. And for dry brushing, I find that dry brushes get worn down quite rapidly, the way I use them anyway. So here's a small Citadel dry brush. It used to actually be bigger than that. The Citadel dry brush, the small one, is actually way bigger than the Army Painter small dry brush, which I also have. So I've ordered a Citadel medium dry brush because there are certain jobs where you don't want something as big and ridiculous as this, the Army Painter vehicle/terrain brush, which is just mammoth. And it's quite tough as well. So if you were using that to try and dry brush something metal, I wouldn't be confident that it wouldn't just start chipping paint off. So I would like to have a medium one for doing large areas on a material that I don't want to demolish with this bad boy, basically. And then I can save the smaller ones, like this one. This has been worn down heavily because I've had to use it on things that I don't want to use the giant one for. So this has probably been used more than I would like to. So I'm waiting for the medium one to arrive now, which should arrive in the pack with Soul Wars and the new General's Handbook and some paints. And I ordered the new combat gauge, actually, because I've never had one of those. And I thought that'd be exciting. Maybe I can review that and get 10 billion hits. Or a video, top 10 uses for a combat gauge. I don't think it comes with a string to put around your neck anymore, though, unfortunately. Bazooka J. Rambo, I paint all my minis with a paint roller. Well, if that's the Remington roller, I could understand that, because that's just a tiny paint roller. But a full-size paint roller, I wouldn't recommend painting miniatures with that. Dave Doge, I'm sat here in my underpants in Spain with a giant fan on full blast. We certainly needed to know that. So, I am wearing shorts, because it's that time of year when the shorts obviously come out, because it's damn hot. And there's nothing worse than a sweaty knee. There's probably a few things worse than a sweaty knee, but there aren't that many things worse than a sweaty knee. So shorts are a must. And I will be wearing shorts tomorrow. I'll be wearing my orange shorts with millions of pockets in them. That way I don't have to wear a jacket, so I won't die of sweat. And I can just keep everything in my shorts pockets, which is nice. I haven't decided what t-shirt I'm wearing tomorrow at the tournament yet. It's always a long process deciding on which of my fashion items to grace everyone's presence with. And I'm thinking probably not a dark t-shirt because it's hot, and I'm sure dark clothes are heat magnets. So perhaps, probably an orange t-shirt. It's probably going to be orange, isn't it? Dice Miniature Paint Guy, I freeze my knees off here in northern Norway. Is it still freezing there in the middle of summer? That would be unfortunate if so. Anything else? Dead Gamer is chilling in underwear, apparently. Drinking iced coffee and assembling Sector Mechanicus terrain. Some of that GW terrain, the kind of industrial and the machinery, that stuff, I've been thinking about picking up some of those kind of lifting vehicles and building a kind of factory setting for Dead Zone. Because I've got loads of Dead Zone walls and no floors left over. I used all the floors on the board, which is pretty obvious. You can see where all the floors went. But I've got tons of walls left. So I could make a really good kind of factory floor setting with just really high walls with arms coming out of them for lifting crates and stuff. I think that could be interesting, and it would give me another Dead Zone terrain project to work on. Let's see. Dave Doge, will you enter an AOS 2.0 tournament for the lols? I would potentially be open to entering an Age of Sigmar tournament at some point if I felt comfortable enough with the rules. Although, really though, I would say that I've never been comfortable with the rules of a game before I've entered a tournament for the first time. Usually I only become much, much better with the rules as a result of playing in tournaments. The Kings of War, I started going to tournaments before I really knew what I was doing 100%. Dead Zone, definitely the case. I pretty much learned how to play relics at tournaments. I barely knew the rules at all before the first one I went to. And I went to one Warhammer Fantasy tournament, and I suppose I knew the rules, I just wasn't intimately familiar with all the different armies. So yeah, most of the time I use tournament scenes as a way to play my way into becoming an expert rather than being one first. And of course I am an expert in all these games now, naturally. I'm hoping that AOS 2.0 is going to be more inspiring to me than midway through the last edition started being. The whole community, I think, you can probably trace, if you go back through all the Andy and Rem shows, the level of excitement that both of us probably had for the game and the community dwindled as time went on, as it stopped being at all about just the freedom of the game. I think it was ever since they introduced points, really, which was a welcome move for just saying, okay, bring about 1,000 points and we'll just have a game. You know roughly how much stuff to take to the game. But I think it was more the mindset that it brought with it. After that, if you look at all the kind of Age of Sigmar shows that are out there, most of them are pretty much focused on what is the best value for the points, rather than what's really cool or what's exciting or what inspires me or what's the coolest model. There are obviously a couple of just fluff backstory shows, but I've never really been too into that. So hopefully there'll be more of a community around bringing the fun back to Age of Sigmar again. For me personally, I'm sure there have been plenty of people there having fun this whole time. It's strange though, because Kings of War, for example, I couldn't give less of a monkey's left nut about the world of Mantica and where the latest border is, and whether the evil forces of the Abyss have encroached an extra mile into the lands of whoever. I really could not care less about any of that stuff. I just like the rule set. And I could just completely leave all the fluff way behind. And I'm sure most people in the community would as well. They play Kings of War because they like the rules. Similar with Dead Zone, but I do like I'm starting to enjoy the Dead Zone setting a bit. I like most of the races and the little backstories to them, much more so than Kings of War. Kings of War really is just purely the rules. Dead Zone, I'm veering towards actually having an interest in the backstory and everything now. Even though I have written some fan fiction, if you will, for Dead Zone, it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek, where I didn't really know anything about the whole universe. I was just kind of making up my own rules for comedy purposes. Let's see. Dead Game, I agree. AOS was super fun when everyone had to behave prior to points. Yeah, it was kind of self-regulating, wasn't it? It was an interesting time. That's something that I'll probably talk with Mr. Remington about on the Andy and Rem show at some point in the near future. Obviously, this week's show on Monday is going to be mainly focused around unboxing Soul Wars, both of us at the same time. And I think Mr. Remington has got the Malign Sorcery box as well. I haven't got that, but I think I'm going to order the Stormcast Eternal Endless Spell box, along with the new Stormcast Eternal book, because that's really the army that I play in Age of Sigmar, so I only really need their spells, I think. Ross says erotic fiction more like. A case can be made that the fiction I wrote for Dead Zone was of an erotic nature, if you have a mind that is firmly entrenched within the gutter. Then definitely it could have sounded that way to someone who's not that. Someone who's a bit lowbrow perhaps would have taken it that way. Clearly wasn't intended with the way it was worded. If you delve deeply into it, give it a good probing deep into the crevices, then you'll see that there was no kind of ill intent whatsoever. Okay, I think it's going to be about time to wrap this one up, folks. I know we've probably only been going about 40 minutes, but it is World Cup season, And I can't even stay up late tonight either, so I better not go and pause the TV too much, because I've got to be up in the morning for the tournament. And because it's such an exciting tournament, obviously, it's such a big deal. Winning one of those tournaments would basically change someone's life overnight, turn them into kind of the ultimate international high-flying billionaire with luxury yachts and mansions on every continent. Then there is a lot of stress attached to that. So sleeping before a tournament isn't always the easiest thing. So I want to make sure there's plenty of time for that. Dave Doge says Portugal game is on right now. Well, I'm pretty sure they haven't started yet. I believe they're going to be starting in about 2 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this one up. And if anyone has any questions or topics you'd like to see discussed next week or the week after or whenever, feel free to drop them in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to check out all the social media nonsense in the description. Join my Facebook group, which is linked below as well. And in that group, of course, you can comment on anything that's going on, specifically things that are being covered on this channel. Post pictures of your stuff if it's somehow relevant to things I've been talking about. And let's get the old screen share up here again so you can see my beautiful Photoshop work. And you'll see plenty of live shows, 2 on Monday. It's going to be the tournament breakdown of all my games from the tournament, and then, of course, the Andy and Rem show in the evening, so look out for both of those. And with that, I think it's time to say good night out there, whatever you are.